many-colored splendor await, as does the bridegroom, untitled Antony Armstrong-Jones. His father sits on the opposite side of the sanctuary from the royal family.
It was a single DNA test in 2004 that finally exposed the truth nobody saw coming. For decades, the world believed the story of a turbulent royal marriage, a simple clash of personalities between a free-spirited princess and a bohemian artist. But that was the carefully crafted lie. The test delivered a cold, hard scientific fact. A woman named Polly Higson was the illegitimate daughter of Antony Armstrong-Jones, and her birth date was a calculated insult, a secret born during what was supposed to be his fairy tale honeymoon with Princess Margaret. But the identity of Polly's mother was the real explosion, a revelation so shocking it rewrote the entire history of their relationship. This wasn't a marriage that slowly fell apart. It was a deception from the very first day, a web of betrayal so deep it would take half a century to fully unravel. Long before he ever laid eyes on a princess, Antony Armstrong-Jones was learning how to lie and how to bury the pain of rejection. He was born into a world of privilege, the son of a prominent barrister and a glamorous socialite. But his charmed childhood shattered just before he turned 5. His parents' divorce was the first major betrayal, the first crack in his world. He was sent to live with his mother, who quickly remarried a man who would dramatically elevate their social standing. Lawrence Parsons, the 6th Earl of Ross. Overnight, Antony was part of the nobility, but inside his new, grand home, he was treated as an inferior, a commoner surrounded by his half-siblings' pure noble blood. The rejection was searing, teaching him that status was everything, and he fundamentally lacked it. And then, the world gave him a real reason to be angry. On a family holiday in Wales, he contracted polio. For 6 agonizing months, he was isolated in the Liverpool Royal Infirmary. A boy fighting for his future, his body racked with pain. And in all that time, only one person from his family came to see him: his sister, his mother, his father, his stepfather. None of them showed up. He was utterly abandoned in his darkest hour, when he finally recovered, bearing a limp that would last his entire life. His family didn't welcome him home with open arms. They sent him away. Boarding school after boarding school, culminating at the elite Eton College, became his new reality. He was being taught a brutal lesson: you are on your own, and you cannot rely on anyone. That lesson hardened him into a determined, yet deeply insecure, young man. At Cambridge University, he drifted, first studying natural history for a mere 10 days before switching to architecture. He seemed lost, and his life took a significant turn when he failed his second-year exams. This failure, a recurring theme in his early life, was a massive disappointment to his already distant parents. But he had found one escape: a camera. Photography was more than a future career. It was a way to observe the world without being seen, to control the narrative entirely. He leveraged his upper-class connections to build a reputation, capturing fashion models and stage stars. His studio on Pimlico Road became infamous, not just for the art but for the hedonistic parties. The lively gatherings for the young. Women he photographed were the stuff of London legend. Scandalous rumors swirled whispers of affairs with both men and women, a hedonistic playground, where the stifling rules of his upbringing did not apply. He was consciously building a persona, the brilliant, rebellious, and dangerously attractive artist, and it was this carefully constructed image that caught the eye of the most exclusive family in the world. Queen Elizabeth II herself commissioned him for royal portraits, appreciating his unconventional and modern style. He was charming, disarming, and different from the stuffy courtiers that surrounded them, and he quickly learned to use this access as a weapon. He began a very public, on-again, off-again affair with a showgirl named Jackie Chan. It was the perfect smokescreen, making him look like a harmless, lovelorn playboy, but his intentions were far more calculated. His sights were secretly set on a much, much higher target. Princess Margaret, the Queen's younger sister, was uniquely vulnerable. Her spirit had been publicly broken when she was forced by the establishment to give up the man she truly loved, Group Captain Peter Townsend, because he was a divorced commoner. She was lonely, trapped by the gilded cage of her royal duty, and desperately yearning for an escape. Antony Armstrong-Jones presented himself as the perfect antidote, a sensitive, artistic soul who understood her rarefied world but wasn't stifled by its traditions. Their friendship, conducted in stolen, secret moments, quickly deepened. He played the part of the devoted confidant perfectly. He listened. He made her feel seen and exciting. It was a masterful, sustained performance. To officially win her hand, he agreed to what was portrayed as the ultimate sacrifice. The palace demanded he give up his commercial photography career, deeming it unsuitable for the Queen's brother-in-law. He agreed without public hesitation. It made him look like a man desperately in love, willing to give up his very identity for his princess. In reality, it was the first and greatest lie of their public marriage. He had no intention of fully stopping, and the resentment of being forced to abandon his passion began to fester immediately as the shocking engagement was announced in 1960, catching the entire press corps off guard. One voice rang with a chilling note of prophecy. His own father. The man expressed deep doubts about his son's suitability for the role, coldly comparing life in Buckingham Palace to being confined in army barracks. He saw a fundamental incompatibility and a restless nature in his son that the love-struck princess, blinded by his charm, completely missed. The problems began before they even said "I do." Antony chose his close friend, Jeremy Fry, to be his best man. But a routine security check uncovered a devastating scandal. Fry had previously been arrested for soliciting a man in a public bathroom. The palace went into immediate damage control, forcing Fry to step down and providing a flimsy excuse for his absence. It was a stark omen, a shadow of scandal that was trying to attach itself to the union before it was even sealed. But the machine of a royal wedding was unstoppable. The wedding itself was a historic, televised spectacle, a perfect fairy tale for over 20 million viewers. Dressed in regal splendor, Antony and Margaret were married on May 6, 1960, in a ceremony that felt like a new dawn for the monarchy. Then the new couple vanished on a 6-week Caribbean honeymoon, escaping the world's prying eyes. It was during this trip, while the world imagined marital bliss, that Antony Armstrong-Jones's secret life was already taking a dark and permanent route. A child had been conceived just weeks before the wedding, but the mother wasn't Princess Margaret, and her identity would remain a hidden poison, slowly working its way through the heart of the royal family for over 40 years. Returning to London, the facade immediately began to crack. The British press, while initially charmed, soon turned on Antony, branding him an unworthy commoner who had sullied the royal bloodline. This snobbery wasn't confined to the newspapers. It seeped into the very corridors of the palaces they lived in. The staff, particularly a succession of butlers, treated him with disdain, seeing him as an inferior who had married far above his station. One butler lasted a mere 25 days before quitting and selling every detail of their unhappy home life to the hungry tabloids. The picture he painted was not of newlywed bliss, but of tension, arguments, and people already struggling to connect. Within the royal family, Antony found a formidable and openly hostile opponent in Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. Philip, a rugged, no-nonsense naval man, had never liked or trusted the sensitive, artistic Armstrong-Jones after the marriage. Philip's disapproval became overt and relentless. Their personalities were oil and water. Antony was an artist who valued beauty and conversation. Philip was a pragmatist who valued duty and action. The constant clashes at family events left Antony feeling isolated and mocked, reinforcing his childhood feelings of not belonging. Under this mounting pressure, the loss of his career, the critical press, the disdainful staff, and a brother-in-law who despised him, Antony's true character began to emerge. The charming artist began to reveal a core of steel and resentment, and it wouldn't be long before he sought solace in the only way he knew how: illicit affairs. The first cracks in the marriage were not yet public, But behind the closed doors of Kensington Palace, the foundation was already crumbling. In an attempt to create a sense of normalcy, the couple started a family. Princess Margaret became pregnant, and in anticipation of the birth, Antony was granted the royal title of Earl of Snowdon. It was a hollow victory for a man who craved genuine artistic fulfillment, but it did finally win him the approval of his status-obsessed mother. Their son, David, Viscount Linley, was born in November 1961, but parenthood did not heal the growing rift between them. If anything, it highlighted their differences. They were both selfish, immature, and utterly unprepared for the demands of raising a child. Seeking escape, they embarked on another lengthy Caribbean trip, further distancing themselves from their duties and, crucially, from each other. Upon their return, Antony struggled to find a role that satisfied both his restless creativity and the palace's rigid expectations. He was given minor, token appointments that felt like insults to his talents. Margaret, feeling ignored by both her husband and her family, began to retreat into her own world of privilege and pleasure. Her interest in the marriage dwindled, and she sought comfort in drinking and socializing with a more glamorous, celebrity-focused crowd. They became the poster children for swinging London in the early 1960s, but they were swinging in completely separate directions. Antony immersed himself in a circle of Vogue editors and designers, while Margaret befriended the Beatles and actors like Peter Sellers. They were estranged from their families except for the most obligatory official events, and their old, shared group of friends had evaporated. They were the stars orbiting the same gilded cage, but their paths rarely crossed. The distance between them wasn't just emotional, it was physical and social, and this chasm created the perfect vacuum for infidelity to flourish. By 1964, when Princess Margaret gave birth to their second child, a daughter named Lady Sarah, the marriage was already a hollow shell. On the surface, they presented the perfect family portrait: a handsome earl, a beautiful princess, and two lovely children. But behind the closed doors of their Kensington Palace apartment, the fairy tale was dead. They were roommates bound by duty and protocol, and the silence between them was deafening. The stage was set for a drama of mutual betrayal that would scandalize a nation. Antony was the first to make a definitive move. In 1965, claiming he needed a creative break, he planned a trip with a friend from the publishing world. The palace officially stated that Princess Margaret could not join due to pressing royal duties. This was a lie. The truth was far more scandalous. Antony had been spending a significant amount of time with a married Vogue editor named Pamela Collin, and their interactions had long since ceased to be professional. This trip was a thinly veiled opportunity to continue their affair away from prying London eyes. But Antony had underestimated his wife. Instead of sinking into despair or turning a blind eye, Princess Margaret decided on a course of direct and very public revenge. She would not play the victim. She embarked on her own fling with Anthony Barton, her daughter's godfather, and began spending a great deal more time with the actor Peter Sellers. While these relationships were likely more about flirtation and companionship than grand passion, they sent a clear message to Antony. She would not be a passive casualty of his infidelities. The marriage had devolved into a toxic game of tit-for-tat. The most serious of Margaret's affairs was with Robin Douglas Home, the handsome and troubled nephew of a former prime minister. This relationship quickly became intense and emotionally charged. The situation reached a crisis point when Antony unexpectedly walked in on Margaret and Douglas Home in a deeply private conversation at Kensington Palace. To make matters worse, Douglas Home had initiated divorce proceedings from his own wife, raising fears within the palace that he and Margaret were becoming dangerously attached. This time, Antony did not respond with a new affair of his own. He responded with cold, calculated strategy. He devised a plan to intercept a passionate letter that Douglas Home had written to Margaret. He then took that letter directly to the ultimate authority, the Queen Mother. By presenting tangible evidence of Margaret's indiscretion, he not only rid himself of a romantic rival but also successfully shifted the entire blame for the marriage's troubles onto his wife. He emerged as the wronged party, while Margaret was cast as the unstable, problematic princess. It was a brilliant and ruthless power play. The aftermath of this confrontation was tragically dark. Princess Margaret, under immense pressure from the family, obeyed the command and ended her relationship with Robin Douglas Home, devastated and likely suffering from underlying mental health issues. Douglas Home tragically took his own life 18 months later. He was just 36 years old. One might think such a shocking tragedy would serve as a wake-up call, a moment of clarity for the warring couple to step back from the brink. It did nothing of the sort. If anything, it signaled that there were no longer any consequences severe enough to curb their behavior. This period marked the beginning of a new, more vicious phase in their relationship. Anthony's resentment now manifested in cruel and personal insults. He would leave lists of grievances for Margaret to find, filled with breathtakingly nasty comments. After their legal separation, the tension between them surprisingly dissipated. They led separate lives, and Anthony assumed they would remain legally separated forever, as a royal divorce was still considered unthinkable. But in a move that shocked everyone, including him, the palace eventually agreed to grant them a divorce. It was finalized in 1978, making Margaret the first senior royal to divorce since King Henry VIII. Anthony was suddenly a free man. He wasted no time. His relationship with his production assistant, Lucy Lindsay Hogg, had long since evolved from professional to romantic. In a move that stunned his ex-wife, he announced his plans to marry Lucy just 5 months after his divorce from Margaret was final. They married in December 1978. It seemed Anthony was trading the drama of one marriage for the stability of another. But old habits and old demons die hard. Although he had shed the bitter anger that defined his marriage to Margaret, Anthony did not abandon his infidelity. Somewhere between his separation and divorce, he had begun a new affair with a married journalist named Anne Hills. She was shocked when he married Lucy but was unwilling to end their relationship. This affair would span to decades, a secret parallel life running alongside his second marriage. For a while, it seemed Anthony might have found peace. Lucy possessed a patience that Margaret never did. With reduced press scrutiny and no royal obligations, Anthony appeared more content. He even began using his influence for a noble cause, advocating for the disabled, a cause close to his heart due to his own lifelong struggles with the after effects of polio. He and Lucy had a child together, and from the outside, his life looked settled. But beneath the surface, the affair with Anne Hills continued. Tragically, this long-term relationship would have devastating consequences, and had always held out hope that Anthony would leave Lucy for her. But as the years turned into decades, it became clear this would never happen. She had other relationships, even lived with other boyfriends, but she never stopped yearning for Anthony. In late 1996, after being let go from her column at The Guardian and having just been abandoned by another boyfriend, Anne Hills was overwhelmed by a deep depression. She spent one final, lonely Christmas without Anthony, and then she took her own life. She left behind a suicide note expressing her enduring love for Anthony and requesting the return of a family heirloom he had given her. But the real bombshell was discovered by authorities investigating her death: her personal diaries. These diaries contained the meticulously recorded details of her 20-year affair with Lord Snowdon. The press immediately got hold of the story and splashed the sordid details across their front pages. Lucy, Anthony's wife, discovered the truth about his 2-decade-long betrayal in the most public and humiliating way possible. Anthony's response to the tragedy and the exposure was callous in the extreme. He provided Lucy with no explanation, no apology, and simply expected life to proceed as if nothing had happened. He seemed utterly unmoved by the death of a woman who had loved him for 20 years, and the shattering of his wife's trust. But the universe was not finished with him yet. Just 2 years after the Anne Hills scandal, Lucy stumbled upon another, even more shocking revelation. Antony had secretly fathered a child with a magazine editor named Melanie Cable Alexander, a woman nearly 30 years his junior. Over the years, Lucy had become adept at seeing through Antony's manipulations, and this time she confronted him directly. He confessed. Lucy had vowed never to leave him, but this final, staggering betrayal was the breaking point. The man was a bottomless pit of secrets. Antony now found himself caught between his wife, Lucy, and his mistress, Melanie, trying desperately to salvage both relationships but satisfying neither. The financial strain of supporting an ex-wife, a current mistress, and a growing number of children was immense. In a move of breathtaking cynicism, he encouraged Melanie to accept a £250,000 payout from Hello magazine for a photo shoot and interview about their child. He was monetizing his own illegitimate child. Unsurprisingly, Lucy initiated divorce proceedings soon after, even in his later years, as painful muscular atrophy from his polio made movement difficult. Antony's libido remained undimmed. He quickly moved on, dating multiple girlfriends simultaneously. It seemed he was constitutionally incapable of being alone or faithful. He died in 2017 at the age of 86, outliving his ex-wife Margaret by 15 years. His other ex-wife, Lucy, remained his friend and even cared for him in his final years, a testament to her character, not his. In his final years and after his death, more scandalous secrets emerged. Beyond his countless affairs with women, there were persistent speculations about his sexuality, with suggestions he was bisexual. A couple of male interior designers claimed to have had romances with him, though these claims remained unverified. The rumors of his affair with Mick Jagger's wife, Bianca, as a tit-for-tat for Margaret's alleged fling with the Rolling Stones frontman, added another layer of decadent scandal to his legend. But the most damning revelation of all was the one that came from that 2004 DNA test. The mother of his illegitimate daughter, Polly Higson, was not a random model or a fleeting conquest. She was Camilla Fry, the wife of his best friend, Jeremy Fry, the very same best man who had been disgraced before his wedding. The betrayal was so profound it was almost Shakespearean. He had been unfaithful to Margaret before they even married, with his best friend's wife, and the child was born during his honeymoon. It was the foundational lie upon which his entire royal life was built. Antony Armstrong-Jones lived a life of immense talent, privilege, and opportunity, but he will be remembered for one thing above all else: the shocking depth of his betrayals. He was a man who cheated on a princess with his best friend's wife, who drove one mistress to suicide and sold the story of his own child to a tabloid. His story is the ultimate proof that behind the most beautiful facades, the most gilded cages, can lie a darkness so profound it takes a lifetime to fully come to light.